You're listening to Wildlife Control Consultant, where we provide research-based information on all things related to vertebrate pest management. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing you another episode of the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast. Hope you've been well, had a good week. I have been quite busy. I am still in the training period, and my voice is probably a little hoarse from a workshop we did yesterday that went pretty well, teaching people about how to handle ground squirrels and pocket gophers and deer and all kinds of stuff. So people seem to enjoy it, so it was really good to have that training. If you're wondering what the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast is all about, well, we provide research-based information on all things related to the control of animals that have a spine. So if that's something of interest to you, then certainly stay on and listen to our presentation today, where we're going to talk about glue boards in mice. So if you've had mouse problems and you like glue boards, you'd want to listen to some of the research that was done. But before we do that, just want to point out my website, wildlifecontrolconsultant.com, and of course we have materials for sale if you're interested in expanding your training and information. We have a variety of books available, as well as some pieces of equipment that may help you do your job better, like the rodent entry inspection tool, and then of course I have my photo scale cards and even a training event that's online about how to bait, cage, and box traps like a professional. It may be something you want to take. It's about an hour of training. It's about 13 short videos about the theory and philosophy of baiting, and also give you some tips on some things where you may be able to bait as well. So nevertheless, hope you check that out. So why don't we get started today and talk about control of house mice using glue boards. So there we go. There's my page. So what I'm going to be discussing today briefly is some research that was done by Dr. Robert M. Corrigan. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it should. Dr. Corrigan is he is a legend within the field of rodentology, as he calls it, and he used to be a part of the rat control program out of New York City, and he is also a consultant to many companies around the country struggling with very persistent and difficult rodent issues, particularly commensal rodents. That's Dr. Corrigan's specialty, and he is truly a legend. Well, this is an article that he published back in 1998, and it's entitled "The Efficacy of Glue Traps Against Wild Populations of House Mice, domesticus ruddy," and it was published in the 18th volume of the Vertebrate Pest Conference Proceedings. And again, let me give you that title again. It's "The Efficacy of Glue Traps Against Wild Populations of House Mice, domesticus by Ruddy," and it was published in the 18th volume of the Vertebrate Pest Conference. Now, Dr. Corrigan, if you're aware of this or not, he did his doctoral research in the area of rodents in chicken barns, and so this is where he did his work on glue traps, because he noticed that some of the work done on glue boards was done in a laboratory setting, and so he wanted to do his research in a field setting, a wild setting, of course. With the amount of food available in chicken farms, there's a lot of mice in those buildings, and so he was testing glue boards in a quote-unquote natural or wild environment, which is where you as a technician would be handling. So he's in a chicken farm, and he's controlling or putting these glue boards out in an area where they have moderate to high densities of house mice in these chicken barns. So basically, to kind of lay this out, he did his work noticed on two different types of glue boards. Now, he gave the brand names. I think the brand name issue is less important than the structure of the glue boards. And so he basically talked about that there are folded glue boards and open glue boards. Now, a folded glue board is like a little tube that has the glue on the interior walls, where an open glue board is sort of flat, and so it's open to the sky. And those come in two different varieties. The flat variety, where it's just a thin piece of paper or cardboard with the glue on top of it, or a tray, which is somewhat elevated 5 to 8 millimeters off the floor in a plastic container where the glue is poured inside. And he tested the efficacy on these, and that is how easily as it was for mice to get caught in these particular traps. So, to make a long story short, here's some of his results. And so this is where he was testing the open glue board design versus the folded glue board design. Notice how the open glue board design had significantly more captures than the folded glue board design. So in this building 1, it was a 7-3. In building 2, it was 3-0. In P1, building P1, it was 4-2. And the boards moved out of the runway. That is, sometimes when mice interact with glue boards, they're doing stuff to it, right? So 2 were moved out of the runway when it came to the building 1, 4 out of building 2, 7 out of building 3. And glue boards that indicated escapes or non-committal activity, in other words, where they had evidence of whether a mouse got captured and got himself released, or if the mouse was doing something that showed he wasn't, fully committing to the trap, maybe defecating on it or throwing material on it. And that was 8 in building 1, 7 in building 2, and 10 in building 3. So you can see that even though he didn't have these tests out for very long, he often only did them for one night, he was using 21 of each type of glue board in these cases and had them spaced out appropriately. And not a lot of captures, right? So not a lot here, and there's certainly a lot of issues about the boards being moved, or they've been pushed out of the runway, or that the mice were actually escaping. Well, that's no good. Now you've got an educated mouse. Well, let's go to the next results that he had, and that is the interaction rates between the tray, that is where it has that 5 to 8 millimeter lip on it, those plastic glue boards, plastic tray glue boards, versus an open board, which is just sort of a flat piece of paper or a thin piece of cardboard with the glue poured on top. And notice that the trap interaction he had was 65 to 30, with the open board winning that. And in terms of captures, the tray captured 22, where the open board captured 31. Missing traps were 3, and then traps indicating escapes or non-committal activity, 5 on the tray, and 31 on the open board. So, and he was using 128 of each of these, both the tray and the open board. So clearly, the open board had far more interactions with mice than the tray version, but clearly the open board also had a fair amount of escapes or non-committal activity. And so what are the reasons for this? What are some of the conclusions? Well, what he found was that, one, as we've learned, open glue boards are more effective than folded. Flat glue boards are more effective than tray glue boards, right? So if you're dealing with open glue boards, the ones that lack the lip of the plastic trays are going to work better. What are the reasons for this? Well, his argument is that mice slow down when they're approaching holes. So if you have a folded glue board, yes, mice are attracted to holes, they're attracted to tunnels. That's a tunnel, they're attracted to that. But he says they slow down And when they're not familiar with it, they're cautious. And that's even the case when you're using other types of traps, like a multiple catch trap that also uses that curiosity hole. He also believes that on the tray type of glue boards is that ridge is a barrier. Because remember, or keep in mind, that mice rely on their muscle memory of their travel routes. And so when they're exploring their areas, they see that there's something different in front of them. And especially if there's a lip, they're going to slow down. In fact, what he found is that with the tray, that when the mouse encountered that lip, it had a reaction. Many of them began to jump, trying to clear the obstruction by jumping. And that's why he found many of the mice caught in the middle of the tray or at the far end of the tray with their hind feet or just a tail. And many times, if they got caught with the tail, they would drag the trap away. Where on the open glue boards, they would get caught, but they wouldn't have been fully committed. I mean, the flat glue boards that were also, these are both open glue boards. With the flat open glue boards, they would get caught more frequently, but they would also escape more frequently because they weren't fully committed. The times that he found when mice were being captured by glue boards, they tended to be juveniles rather than adults. So yes, glue boards catch mice, that is true, but as a rule, there's always exceptions, as a rule, they're catching juveniles who simply lack the experience, or they lack the length of their whiskers necessary to perceive the threat before they get caught. Because glue boards are ideally used in runway areas where the mouse is simply scurrying along because he's memorized the route, and then you're capturing the mouse as he stumbles into the glue board because he didn't expect to encounter it. So when you're using your glue boards, do not place them in corners because mice are going to slow down when they're coming to the end of a run. So you want to put it in the middle of the wall area so the mouse is having full speed and capture it this way. So that wasn't all in his paper. I'm adding a little bit of additional information that I've learned elsewhere. I'm not a big fan personally of glue boards. I'm not looking to ban them. All that. No. There's every tool has its place. But as a rule, and I'm going to listen to Dr. Corrigan, and I've heard this in terms of his presentation, he says that as a rule, they should not be your first choice. So if your first choice is glue boards, you're not really doing it wrong, because the research, at least his research, showed that traps are far more effective in catching mice, talking about house mice here, than using glue boards. And so if you're using glue boards, think about, why are you using them? Are they necessary to use here? What is the rationale? Because you should be leaning on traps and other methods rather than just starting off with glue boards, because they often they don't catch the adults and they're just catching juveniles. In fact, he also thinks that once a mouse has a negative interaction with these glue boards, that the odors from the glue board warn the mouse not to approach it again. In fact, he also found evidences where when mice knew that glue board was there, they would actually throw debris on the glue board and kind of make a trail through it, or make it so it's no longer sticky, which is a fascinating behavioral action by house mice against these glue boards. So again, I'm not looking to have them banned. I'm not one of those animal rights people. That's not the argument. The argument is what's going to work. You want to control glue board. You want to control your house mice as quickly as possible without educating them to make it harder to eradicate the population. So don't use glue boards as your primary means. Start with your traps first, or if you're using rodenticides, that's fine too. But glue boards should be used in situations where perhaps other tools are not working effectively, or maybe you have a pinch point where mice are getting from point A to point B in a pinch point, and and traps just aren't going to work necessarily in that area, and you need to use some glue boards to kind of capture those mice. But remember, they're capable jumpers, so you need to make sure you account for that distance that they can jump. So keep those things in mind. So open glue boards are more effective. Open glue boards are more effective than the folded. Flat glue boards are more effective than the tray open glue boards. So word to the wise here. So hope you enjoyed that information. Again, I'm Stephen Vantassel. I own Wildlife Control Consultant, and you've been listening to the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast. Do take a few moments, if you would, to subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can be notified. I tend to publish once a week. If you have thoughts, ideas, for new shows, perhaps you want to have a comment, you can put a comment down below as well, or reach out to me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Perhaps you have a question, comment, maybe even a criticism. Perhaps you can give your own comments about your experience with glue boards. And of course, if you know of people or services and businesses that maybe that information should be out to our wildlife control partners, we'd love to hear from you, because we'd love to have guests on our show. We think there's a lot of information out there that could be getting out to even a wider audience, and I'd be happy to help in that regard. Again, just reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. All right, well, that's it for this week, everybody. So do take care. Again, I'm Stephen Vantassel. Till next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast. Vertebrate pest control is an inherently dangerous activity involving risk of bodily injury to you, others, and/or property. Vertebrate pest control also involves legal issues, so be sure to always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and/or other control methods when controlling pests. Wildlife Control Consultant LLC, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their affiliates are not responsible for your use of the information provided here. Always consult a qualified and appropriate professional before employing the information provided here.